And the date is May 20th, 2021. And we are live on Facebook and YouTube on the Full Life Communications channel, page, whatever it's called. And again, this is Race Matters on Full Life Communications on Facebook and YouTube. Follow us live there. And anyone who's already watching, please share the feed and like and follow the Full Life Communications page on Facebook and YouTube. Share the feed, and our hosts will share the feed as well on their personal pages. And if you have several pages, share that. Start a watch party. Hey, do whatever you would like to do to get the word out about Race Matters. And people can watch the show at their convenience if you post it to their page, because everybody's not available when the show is live, and we understand that. But the topic of race in America, race matters, is important. So we want to continue the dialogue on this platform, and we call it a safe place to have the hard conversation. And so as we have the conversation amongst ourselves and have it with you, we are encouraging everyone who watches the show to begin to have these types of conversations with others in their family, in their workplace, friends. Now, again, I say that, but tread lightly, because this is such a volatile, emotional issue, and understandably so, because everyone has a different experience. So that's why we want to make these conversations a safe place so people can feel heard and feel understood and not judged and attacked. So we want to be a model for that type of behavior and that type of conversation. So we started this show with that in mind. And first and foremost, we serve our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and He is the inspiration for the show. And since we represent Him, we do everything in love. So that being said, my name is Sharon Thomas. I am the CEO of Full Life Communications Media Company. And I'm also a licensed professional counselor in the states of Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And so I do marriage counseling, individual counseling for mental health, behavioral health, emotional well-being, and a lot of anger management. I get a lot of clients for anger management. A lot of Americans are angry, and we can see why. But this has been going on for a while. But so my practice consists of a lot of that and a lot of trauma work. So I also I am in school right now in a doctorate program for marriage and family therapy, and so I should be Dr. Sharon sometime soon. Let's stay tuned for that. Um, I am going to allow my co-hosts to introduce themselves now. Stephanie, how about you?
Hi, my name is Stephanie Esposito, and I am of Italian descent, both sides. I have had two careers in media, one as a TV producer and the other as an advertiser. And I thought that I could take some of my experience and maybe contribute to positive conversations and help maybe in an informative manner and give a different perspective from that background, because I'm in support of everything you're doing, Sharon, and again, want to have positive conversations and contribute to that dialogue.
Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate you joining me and the others on the show and bringing your expertise and your will to the show to help show the audience that it can be done. This conversation can be had with all different walks of life in love. So thank you for joining us. Mariana, how about you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Mariana, and yeah, I come to the show, I guess, with a little bit of a immigrant experience, and able to provide some of those voices and stories, as well as I am a mental health professional, being licensed as a marriage and family therapist. Yeah.
Thank you, Mariana. And I know Mariana from school. We're in the same program. She's a little ahead of me. And that's how I met Mariana. I met Stephanie way, 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 way. We won't talk about how many years ago, but it was way, way back when we went to high school together.
And middle school, part.
And middle school, exactly. Okay, okay. So we go way back. So now it's Rosie's turn. I met Rosie at the church that I currently attend and I've been there since 2005. I don't know if you were there before me, Rosie, or
Oh,
not.
I've been there. Yeah, I've been there almost. I've been there a year after its inception here.
Oh,
Um,
okay. So yeah,
yeah.
so I think we started
So,
maybe 5 years before I got there, something like that.
so I've been there. Well, how old
Maybe
are we,
20,
Sharon? Yeah.
16 for me, so maybe like
I,
20 for you.
so it's been like around about 20 for me. Yeah. So
Okay.
I've been there. A year after Bishop started the church is when I joined. My niece had
Okay.
introduced me to it. And so that's where I met my girl Sharon, and I did another show with her. She was doing as she did a lot of political talk on it, and that
Headline
was
breakdown, the
enjoyable.
news show.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and that was I stepped in every once in a while. I would join her and her other show host, and it was great. What did we call him? We gave him an Obama tall or what?
Oh, I know his title was Obamakin.
Obamakin
Patrick
tall.
Obamakin Toll. He's a
Yeah, it was
Obama
so
fan.
funny when Sharon gave him that title. I loved it. But
No, he
anyway,
gave
honey,
himself that title.
he gave
That
it to.
wasn't me.
Well, he wasn't playing with that too. He was
He
serious.
wasn't. He got a shirt made out of and everything.
Yeah. So I am I born and
Giving
raised in Camden. I'm retired from the utility company I worked for over 26 years. Um, my father's Puerto Rican, my mother's black. I say black because I don't consider a person who was born and raised here African American. She was not born in Africa, so she's not African American. She's American. So like I said, born and raised in Camden, and I've met these ladies on the show. Sharon I've known, and I have been enjoying the conversation and the talk because it is a tough conversation. It is a tough some of the conversations we have is tough, but if we can talk together and do it in a way where we can not be offended or offensive, but just talk, because there are some situations that we talk about and other people don't, because they haven't experienced your lifestyle or where you come from or even your ethnic uh, bringing up and how you were raised. Then some of the conversation can be surprising, and it's good to know or even ask questions to people when you don't understand, because I think it's foolish when you try to make a comment or tell people how they should feel and you've never walked a day in their shoes. So these conversations are necessary today. So,
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And is this necessary so we can understand that there is a way to have the conversation. It doesn't have to be a lot of yelling and screaming and anger. We can feel how we feel, but we can speak and share how we feel rather than behaving how we feel. You know
right.
what I mean? And so we walk away with a better understanding of the other person. Whether we agree or not is not is not the issue. It's let me understand you better than I know you right now by
Right.
me listening. We're poor listeners. That's part of the problem.
Right.
We don't wanna
Right.
listen. We just want to. I heard a soundbite of what you said. Now I want to rebut.
Right.
If we just listen and we can gain an understanding by better listening. Now it's like, okay, I hear what you're saying. Now my opinion is different than yours. So I disagree, and here's my opinion. So now we've just disagreed without being disagreeable, and we can still walk away with our relationship intact. It's the emotions that take over and overpower us, and then the conversation goes south because we're not able to, at least in that moment, manage our emotions in a way to have a productive conversation. So we're demonstrating it here for you with all these different ethnicities coming together. That's why, I chose ladies of different ethnicities so we can show that we have different backgrounds, different experiences, and we can still come together in love and have that conversation. So again, this is Full Life Communication. This is Race Matters on Full Life Communications on Facebook and on YouTube. Please share the feed as well as follow and like Full Life Communications. And if you're watching on one of the ladies' pages other than Full Life Communications, the ladies will have to look at their phones if there's any questions, because I believe, and I'm not all that tech savvy, that I only get the questions or comments that come through if you're watching actually on Facebook. So if you're commenting on another page other than that, and we're not able to see it, or the ladies don't get to their phones in time, we apologize in advance that we can't see it, but love you regardless, because we know that you are watching because you want to have your thoughts and opinions heard, or just want to receive some information to hear the conversation, which that's fine too, because hopefully you'll gain something from it and walk away better than you were before the conversation. So right now, our topic today is information and misinformation, along with disinformation. And Stephanie is going to lead the conversation tonight to share some background information about those things and in the news media. I forgot to say that part. And so she's going to give a little history about that. And then we're going to have a conversation about how that is affecting our lives today as it relates to race, as it relates to how we get our news, and as it relates to how we're just getting along, not so much getting along with one another, although that's a part too, but as far as how we're advancing, I should say, our lives in America, specifically with misinformation and disinformation. So, Stephanie, let me turn it over to you.
Thanks, Sharon. A little bit, or a couple other comments on the information and misinformation words. I know you all know this, but for those who are watching, we did choose this topic because we are talking about conversations, and part of the difficulty also with some of these conversations is there are two different sets of facts that people are trying to have conversations about, which makes a conversation impossible, in my opinion. So I'm not sure we can talk about this as we start talking about the specifics, ladies, but if you struggle with others and if there are a lot of people in your lives who you cannot have these conversations because maybe they are looking at one side only or they're only watching specific news outlets, etc. But I know I do have family in my life who watch a whole nother set of news. It would appear that we are on two different planets and there are no conversations because we can't agree to the facts. So that is in essence one reason we are talking about this topic. And in fact, if we do want to effect change and get awareness for social injustices, misinformation and disinformation is a huge barrier to that goal. So that being said, I want to start out with us talking about information first. And I want to start out with, because we know how much has changed. So I want to share between us, what do we do now to get our news information? What did we used to do? What kinds of things do you look at? Do you look at TV or do you look at just online or do you do some radio, et cetera, et cetera? And maybe give me some specific examples what you might look at for news and how you choose your sources that you trust. So maybe Sharon, I'll start with you.
Excuse me. Most of my news, well, okay, you want to know back in the day versus now or just now?
Yeah, whatever you feel like you
Okay.
remember. What do you do now? I'm sorry to throw it all at you.
No, it's
because
okay.
there's so much to cover. Right?
I know.
What do you do now? What did you used to do?
Okay, so what I used to do, and this is dating myself, there was only one thing you could do, or a couple of things. You could watch the three major networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, all right? And, or, listen to the radio. And I was not a radio listener then, and I was not a news person then either. I mean, I heard my parents talk. So that's mostly how I got the news. Or I watched the local, say, 11 o'clock news, 6 o'clock in the evening. I wasn't, maybe at dinner time or whatever it might be on. But I wasn't a news person. I didn't become a news person until after, like in my 20s. I was late in the game, if that's late, after college even. So then I got into news after college, but then I just watched it because it was on because my parents were watching it. So I would hear most of it from them. But now I'm a news junkie, and I get most of my news from the news outlets that I subscribe to from the apps, which is like I subscribe to, like, I'm going to say all of them because I want to hear what everybody has to say about that one subject, because there's different opinions about the one subject. So I have the three major networks of old, as well as, the CNN, the Fox News, the MSNBC, and, the smaller ones, the Politico, the Daily Beast, Your Black World, just tons of them. And so I read those and then I post them to my news feed. And so that's how I get most of my news. And then in the evening, I'll watch my favorite news channel to watch on television is CNN. So in the evenings, maybe when I have a little downtime, I'll watch CNN, and it's somewhere between Anderson Cooper, Chris Cuomo, and Don Lemon. Usually the latter part of the evening, even before more like Chris and Don, because I'm still working sometimes during Anderson. So that's where I get most of my news.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, what about the shows like 2020 and 60 Minutes
Oh yeah.
that might do news topics?
Yeah, I watch those now, but I used to watch those more when I had more time. My time is so limited. That's why I get most of my news from my phone app, because I get notification, it'll pop up and I'll just read it real quick, like throughout the day, as opposed to like sitting down with a chunk of time. And so because I work late in the evening, I can't watch 2020 and 60 Minutes as frequently as I used to. But I do like those shows because they do specific topics and then they'll talk for a period of time, as opposed to like regular news. You're talking like 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes on a topic, and then they're on to the next thing. So I like that they have blocks of times on a subject. So, but
Right.
I don't watch it as often as I would like.
Right. Okay. How about Rosie? I'll go to you next, and then Marianne. I know you're a little younger, so we might have some questions for you.
Well, like Sharon, we've watched the evolution of news, evolution of information. You might as well call it. Started like her, my mom's favorite news channel used to be Channel 6. That's the one she used to love watch.
Same here.
But yeah. So, just
ABC.
Yep.
Yeah.
So just basically the news stations and radio, because I worked for a utility company, so I was in my truck all day. So I used to listen to the news on there, get clips of news on there. If I wanted to hear something seriously local, I'd get 1060, even to catch the weather and especially, what's the weather going to be like. So get 1060 if I'm in my truck, find out what's going on the roads. But basically the evolution, and now we're at the point where we have cable channels and you've got so many news stations, and the inability of people to decipher what they're listening to as actuality, because they don't compare it. A lot of the people today, especially the younger people, they get information and say, see, so they don't check it out. Even with me. Now, of course, my biggest thing was MSNBC. I used to watch that all day long because I like Joy Reid, Rachel Maddow. Morning Joe. I loved it all. Now, Morning Joe used to rub me wrong a little bit because Joe Scarborough, he was a Republican and he would say some stuff that would bother me, but I listened. But basically that's it. A lot, like I said, on the radio in my truck. So as far as probably the past 10 years or so or less, a lot of information coming off of, the social medias. So when you're on Facebook and when you get on your phone, they actually have a news section when you're on your phone. And if you go over to it and you scroll down, then they have all of these topics of the stories of the day, topics of the day. So, it's a lot of evolution with getting information. Just the ability to understand if it's dis, or information proper. So I think a lot of the people that are our age are so hard set on checking out the stuff that we get. When we hear something, I don't take it at face value because I've taken it and saw wrong, or let me put it this way. I've repeated what people say and then find out that what I repeated was incorrect and have to go back and fix it. So I have learned how to get information, extrapolate from it, go on, find out the truth, and then go on and either say, wow, this is real, or say, y'all need to watch reposting this because this is false information. Here's the thing talking about it's false. So the evolution of social media has taken news to a whole level.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it has. We're going to get more into that specifically. Just quickly then, Mariana, what is your perspective and what have your changes been from, being younger to now in terms of taking?
Yeah. Well, mine is so complicated. I'm trying to think where do I even start?
So what was it different
So
for you coming
up,
here? Maybe I'll
yes.
help.
So
what do you remember growing
news,
up where you were, and maybe you didn't watch news?
Yeah, so our family used to watch actually quite a bit of news. But growing up in the village of Voinescu in Republic of Moldova, we only had like three stations three channels that we could really watch. One was the national Romanian channel, the national Moldovan one, and the national Russian. My parents knew quite a bit of Russian, and we understood a bit too. So we actually would watch the news from all three of them. My parents would, and we would watch with them. And that was because, we just like to be informed. The Romanian one is one that had a lot more like international news, whereas Moldovan and Russian was more bent towards like Russia, just because Moldova was communist and it was very, agenda driven because they were owned by communists, those channels. So there was a lot of like propaganda surrounding that. Whereas the Romanian one was a lot more neutral, and Romania had like many political parties, so like they kind of covered all of them. And we also heard international news from all over. Moving here at the age of 15, I belonged to a very conservative church. And I don't remember like at 15 caring much about news actually. Although, so yes, this part I was forgetting about. I think I shared with some of you ladies that my sisters and I watched a lot of like telenovelas on the Spanish channels, and actually that was where we would watch the news. We would watch Noticias on Univision and Telemundo, the two Spanish channels from here. So we barely heard any American news until way much later. And even then, we didn't fully like listen to a lot of American news in our household once social media came around. I follow, as Sharon said, a lot of them. And I honestly, at this point, do prefer to read through social media because that gives me a bit of a glimpse of like, I want to see what people are saying about this. How are people interacting? So after I read the article, I like to go in the comments and, like how they send the top ones, the most interactive with at the top. So, but I do have apps for news as well, and I get, them on my phone.
Okay. So I guess what I'm trying to understand as well is, does it seem very different here from where you grew up in terms of the media landscape? Is there a lot more choice? I mean, I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's a lot more. I think we have a delay between the two of us.
Yeah, I know. There's a little delay. I'm trying to catch it. Okay, so we don't have to spend too much time on the specifics of how we changed, but I just kind of wanted to start talking about how there is all of this choice, which does contribute, it's common sense, to there being different sets of facts starting to root in. And in fact, like you ladies, I mean, I think we all have a special interest in wanting more news info. I kind of watch a lot of things. When I was growing up, I was less news focused, like you, Sharon, but then later I started picking up more. But also because I've been in the media for so long, I always do. I mean, I'm not just a regular consumer. From a business perspective, I always kind of look at everything. So I'm never sure, that's also why I always want to know what other people look at. But I do know that some of my friends or family members, maybe they have a certain station or they watch conservative news because they're conservative leaning, or liberal and liberal leaning news. But a lot of people also don't watch anything because there's so much, and maybe they listen to their boyfriend or their girlfriend as their source. I do think that happens too, because so maybe if they have a conservative bent, that's the bent they're getting. So that's another way. It's not just from us physically looking, but I do believe that because there is so much choice, people might not even be watching news as much. It's not necessarily between just the news channels. So anyway, in terms of how you have now changed and you take in news with social media, I know you started to say, Mariana, you look at the comments. Do you do both? We didn't get too much into the social media yet. Has that taken less time or taken more time out of your TV or maybe print reading?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. How do you
Mhm.
manage your social media?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I think and it depends, right? I think in some ways, having been a student my entire life, essentially, with like little breaks along the way, um, being on social media, I can easily like tune back and forth, right? Whereas like if I start to play a video, and I would do that where on occasion I will, want to see more details and I'll go look for a certain clip to hear it rather than read. In some ways, reading it is a lot quicker that I can get the main idea and then like return to work because I'm working on my laptop a lot while doing school papers and such. Um, and it's very rarely for me at this point that I'll actually like watch, like I would on occasion, but not a whole lot.
Right.
But that's the case for any TV, for movies or anything, that
Right.
sort for that matter.
And
So
ladies, I don't mean to, I
it
don't want
helps.
to, Rosie or Sharon, I mean, I'm just trying to understand how you all incorporate social media now versus years ago.
You want to start, Sharon?
Social media. How long has that been out?
That came out in 2000. It
2000.
started to
Wow.
appear.
21
2000.
years. That's a
Yeah,
long. It seems like it's shorter.
Yeah. In the last 12, then started
Yeah.
rooting, it started to
Right.
ramp up, but quickly. But 2004, I mean, it started to get advertisers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm just curious how it's managed. We don't not to spend a lot of time. Just hey, I do
Yeah.
half. I think you said, Sharon, you actually view the media through
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
internet.
because I use
Correct?
the apps, to get, which is the news station, but I use the apps and read the articles, and then I post them to my social media page. So I get them through my apps. I mean, that's not really
Okay.
social media, that's the news station, and they just have an app,
Right.
right?
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm sorry.
So,
I meant to say digital. That's a
yes,
digital. But in
right.
terms
So it's
of
like a digital newspaper, basically. So I get
for
mine like digital
your
news.
social media, like when you look at your Facebook and your
Yeah, I don't
Instagram
really
and your
do that. I look at
okay.
Instagram not for news, but just to see like, oh, somebody has a fitness page or somebody has a cooking page or for that. But with Facebook, literally, I never go to anyone's page. Because when you post it, well, as when I post, 'cause since I subscribe to all these apps, news apps, when I get a notification and say I'm reading the digital newspaper, I don't have to go on Facebook or anything to read it. I just read it from actually their,
Right.
like say NBC's digital platform.
Okay.
And so then all of the buttons have a share button. So then I read it. If I want to share it, I click share and I share it to Facebook and I share it to Twitter. Those two pages look the exact same on both of those platforms. But I don't go on there and read. I just post.
Right.
So
Okay.
I don't read now,
I asked it that way because I do it that way. I will now
Okay.
go through social media. I can go blah blah blah. I mean, I don't mean to get too much into it. I was just curious, because that has changed drastically for me, the way I take in my news media. So even I might go directly to an app. But anyway, moving along, we're talking about all these things. We now have 24-hour news channels that we didn't grow up with. So we have all this choice. And the other piece of this is, with everything opening up, I started to reference on some of the sheets I had sent you. Were you aware that there was this rule way back called the Fairness Doctrine that regulated the news stations as well as other stations?
Well, I never knew it. I mean, it's not that I studied it anyway. I mean, I think the only people that would ever know that are people who were involved in news media. So they had to study that. They had to know that because there were ramifications if they sent out information that was incorrect that could do damage to someone. So I personally believe that a lot of people who are involved in news media are the ones who would know that. And just to piggyback a little bit, because I didn't comment on the news thing, but like Sharon, like I did, honestly, I did get some of my a fair amount of my news from Facebook and from social media, what people would post, and I would be surprised. And to this is what, when I told you all I would repost stuff and was shocked. This is what made me stop. One time, something was posted from a friend, and the problem with their post was I had already known in this situation. This one was a silly one, but they were posting why you shouldn't eat shellfish and that this is what it does to the body. And it had a woman laying on the ground with blood coming out of her eyes, her mouth, her nose. It was her ears. I mean, the blood was pouring out. And thank God that a month prior to that, I was watching a news feed and when Sharon mentions digital, like when you go in your phone, if you go to your phone, you can swipe sideways. I don't know if y'all can see it, but it'll tell you the top news stories that are up. Right. So you're not on Facebook. And I had seen in there a story about a young woman who was, I don't know if she was Israeli or what, but she was marching for women's rights in her country. And she had been shot through the heart by someone that did not approve of her pushing for women's rights. And because she was shot through the heart, her heart exploded. And they showed the whole thing. They showed her marching. They showed when she was shot. They showed them lay her on the ground and the blood start flowing out. And I was able to tell my friend, this is not true. It's a lie. This woman was martyred and someone has taken her death and used it for their benefit. And this is sick. And I sent her the feed of the actual shooting of that woman. So that's when I actually stopped reposting stuff and started checking the news out and seeing if this is true or not. And so many of them were false. So that was my liberation of reposting news things. So, but yeah, it's dangerous when you do it that way. So you have to be careful.
Right. I guess, yes, we know social media can be the wild, wild west. But I'm trying to get to just the notion of the fairness doctrine is just an example of there used to be some regulation and now there's not much. Do you think there should be again?
What happened to the Fairness Act? Like, did it go away?
Right. What happened was it was with radio. This is why I'm starting to ask about these different mediums.
Okay.
With conservative talk radio, FM was taking the lead because AM radio could not broadcast music to the quality that FM could. And when AM started to refigure their formats, they went mostly talk because they couldn't compete and they were really struggling. So with the talk, they really started getting some wild speakers and started going after big personalities. And that really started when they loosened up the fairness doctrine, because now there's so much media to monitor. That's one reason. There was a lot of buyouts and acquisitions happening in the 80s as well. So it was just too much to monitor. They let it go. They didn't require anymore that you had to present the other side. News in the early day actually wasn't for profit. So this is what I want to talk about. That's why I'm throwing this stuff out there. But finally, with the radio, it became the conservative talk radio grew out of this deregulation because these personalities that had big conservative political opinions, like Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck, started there. Then they appeared on TV, some on Fox, which we'll talk about. But that's one leg as to where the conservatives started to really root in. And given all the choice of cable and this new world of focusing and targeting, people wanted to see their own opinions in news. So it happened naturally too. It wasn't all, we're going to get everybody. There's always a natural fallout from growth and buying people, et cetera, et cetera. So this is what happened. But the point is, would it work now to reinstitute something? There is a lot to monitor. Back in the day, it was for the big networks because they were large. And that's why when cable first appeared, they weren't monitored. They weren't even measured because they were so small. I remember even when we were trying to sell cable to our advertisers, we had to explain it was a psychographic target. It would do well.
Mhm.
You can't measure the eyeballs, and now it's large enough to measure. So I don't mean to blab on, but this is what I'm getting at. Go ahead.
Isn't this the same situation that a lot of news medias are feeling that social media should be held accountable too, right? So because they look at it and they say, social media does not stop people from putting false information, and it's causing so much havoc that when is our government going to do something about making, since they want to allow people to broadcast news, when will they be held accountable just like news stations? So that struggle is not only with the regular news and AM and FM, but now it's headed toward social medias because they put stuff out there and they don't check behind the sources, and they let people go crazy with it.
And at this point, that is the main place where people get their information from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now you're talking about. And I'm sorry, Marianne. I'm sorry.
And there's two things happening.
Yeah, I was just going to highlight the point about, I think, Stephanie, you had said that the argument for, this was free speech, right? So this is where people are starting to say,
to deregulate, deregulate.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and again, well, let's maybe strip it into two different sections: broadcasts like TV or radio, and social media. Because social media, let's come back to that in a minute, is humongous. I mean, you're talking billions of people. You know what I mean? That's a challenge to manage. So, yes, I want to talk about for 1 minute, is it manageable to start with something like a couple few key networks? Do you think it would help to bring back, and let me give you another example. In England, they've got a media commission called, I think it's OM, and they monitor the big BBC, and they make sure everybody is doing good practices. Now, clearly they're not monitoring the tabloids over in London.
Right.
But this is for the broadcast. So that's why I'm breaking it up right now in terms of logistics. Let's start with, if it were manageable, and this is a smaller piece, do you think the would that help? And also the OM in London, they actually banned Tucker Carlson and Hannity because of their communication practices. So that doesn't air over there. And that's what I'm trying to get at. Is that effective? There's a group now, like a grassroots group, that is trying to hold Carlson accountable for some of his comments. I think Hannity too. I'm not sure on the details, but I'm raising all this because there is no monitoring at all. And, with all these issues, especially the social injustices, they do seem like big barriers. And are there ways to monitor it without infringing on freedom of speech, which is what they're crying is happening to them if they're restricted? What are your thoughts on it? Anybody?
I think something should happen, because it's like anybody could be hired on one of those platforms, any platform, and spew venom, if you will, and it'd be okay. And then that sway those people who may be vulnerable listeners, because it sounds enticing, it sounds like it might be true, it sounds like, and many people don't do their own investigation, like, Rosie was talking about. So something like the Fairness Act of way back when, why can't that still be relevant? Holding people to a standard. If you're going to produce news, then here's the standard, and maybe because, when the news back in the day, it wasn't so much opinion. It was, I'm stating here, this is what happened. You do with it what you want to do with it. This is what happened today. There was a fire on this street. I'm not telling you how I felt about the fire on this street
Right.
and who I thought started the fire or whatever. I'm just saying there was a fire on this street. You do with it what you may. Now we have, people such as us, right, and others who are putting it out that there was a fire, but now we're sharing our opinion about the fire and what we thought
Right.
led up to it and what we thought about how whatever happened afterward, what we felt about that. And so now our opinions are coming into the news. And so who's to say whose opinion is right or wrong? It's just opinion. So the facts are getting lost. And so
Right.
we're following people based on who has beliefs similar to mine. Well, who's to say my belief is correct? Who's to say your
Right.
belief is correct? And so now we're going down a big rabbit hole of where are the facts?
Right.
And we're getting into these factions, you know.
Right. Right.
It's crazy.
And then the,
Yes.
the other side of that is that people are so dogmatic on what their opinion is that it's like they incite people to either to agree with their opinion, or they're going to start bashing you or calling you out of your name and stuff. So
Right.
so somebody might start something, but that little match that they strike doesn't make the forest fire grow big. What makes it grow big is the wind that's blown on it. And the problem isn't that the people start the match, it's the people that they give that fire to. And what they and what they do is they take something, and before you know it, the news that they mentioned isn't even an issue. It's you don't agree with me and I don't like it. And now we're attacking each other. And the whole point of that news report that was put on there is lost. And that's where the problem is. People, like you all said, people's emotions get so enthralled in that information that people can't disagreeably agree disagreeably. You can't say you can't give your opinion without offending somebody. And it's so sad because some of this news that's out there needs to be put out there because we need to come together as a country and fix certain things that are happening. But
Right.
instead, we're starting to see people and say, oh, you don't like it. Yeah, no, I don't like what you're saying. So now I'm going to attack you. And really, social media has now become a bully pulpit. It's a bully
Right. And it
Yeah.
it can feed the haters. And on that note, here's the tricky thing too. Social media, like for instance, we do get to see videos we need to see sometimes, right? But they also encourage these haters and all the QAnon and everything that happen. So what are the
Yeah.
answers there? I mean, I don't have the
Yeah.
answer, but I'm raising it.
Right.
Go ahead.
And I think the answer is probably very complex and hard, and it will change over time. And right. Yes. So honestly, I kind of, like the idea of what social media has started to do recently since the election and the claims that,
Sorry, y'all. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
gonna
This is our
start
dance.
party.
This is our dance segment.
I know, right?
I was
It's a dance break.
I was trying to see if anybody had responded on my page, and then ended up missing the volume thing, and it started playing music.
Sorry, go ahead, Mariana.
Go ahead, Mariana.
I was just going to highlight that, I know a lot of conservatives don't like the fact checking, right? But the information that now goes along with, like, if you post anything about the pandemic, there'll be like a tab there saying, right, for more information and link to CDC, and similar things about the election and all this fact checking. Now, I know some people think, they're biased and whatnot, but at least it's a start where you can go, right? And someone has attempted to do the research and say, right? Because there's times when we have the time to go and dig something, right? And we want to do ourselves and do it in more depth. But there's a time and place when I'm like, I want to go to a fact-checking place and quickly for them to tell me, right? Is there any evidence? Because it will point you to, like, this article here said this, right? A few years ago. So I like the idea of, like, allowing more voices, because sometimes it's important to know what people think, right? We want to know, like, what do you really think? I'm not going to stop you, because then I want to know, right? Are you someone I can trust or not? However, then I also want other information and places where I can go and fact check, to see if what you're saying is truth or not.
Right. Completely. I'm actually looking at Danique's comment. You probably are too, Sharon.
Yeah, let me highlight it.
About
Mariana is going to come over your face, so I apologize. Stephanie, you can read. You can read that.
I understand as a country, we're always trying to uphold the First Amendment and prevent what we call censorship, but there definitely needs to be a way to prevent hearsays, and just plain falsities on the internet. Completely. I agree 500%.
I'm putting
and
up
that's
her
why
next one, Stephanie.
Okay, good. And
you can read that one too.
And there should be for such behavior, fines, public. I agree.
He says floggings.
Girl, look, she's going. Listen, she wants floggings happening.
Floggings in the public square.
Look,
in my
so the
travels,
public can see you punished.
Yeah, I saw a shame cage.
Right. Yeah.
They used to put you in a cage. If you
Yes.
did something wrong.
The scarlet letter. Right.
Exactly. But it is true. We have to start somewhere. And look, we all want to be able to speak, and freedom of speech is important, but there has to be a standard and a stopping at hatred and hateful rhetoric. I mean, we have lawyers who sue for defamation, and there's reasons for that, and libel, and it goes further. It's bad. It's wrong. So I totally agree. There has to be something. And that's why I thought it's so interesting with Prince Harry trying this commission to now what you were saying, Rosie, with social media. I don't know how they're going to do this, but he's not even saying we're starting the practice and we're going to get rid of misinformation immediately. They are taking the right first step, which is they're going to get together for 6 months and discuss it, because that really is all you can do. They're going to get academics, Katie Couric, right? Because how do you manage social media? But he's right to say it's becoming a humanitarian issue.
Right. Absolutely.
That article said.
Absolutely.
Because there is an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation again. And since we're on the sentences, I'm just going to say we're defining it by misinformation being false, inaccurate, or misleading information, disinformation being all that, but deliberately deceptive. So deliberately misinformed. So I love that they're putting out this effort. At a minimum, just communicating that it's a problem is important.
Right.
So, it'll be interesting to see what they do. They started in April, and it's a 6-month commission.
Yeah, that'll definitely be interesting. And I'm glad somebody's taking it up, because it's this. I mean, this is snowballed in a short amount of time. So can you imagine 20 more years, what it will be? Look how far it's disintegrated thus far. And that's only just say in the past 5 years or so that it's like really gone downhill.
Yeah. Because we had someone in charge who liked to create this.
I was trying to avoid that, Mariana.
Yeah, but even though I've heard of fake news, even though I've heard the word fake news before him, he mastered it.
Yes, and I'm glad you're bringing it up, Rosie. Let's talk about it. When did you first hear that term from the former administration, and what was it around, and what are your thoughts?
I heard that from day one. I mean, when he started, he was talking fake news before he ran. I mean, everything about everybody else was fake news. Anytime somebody said something about him, it was fake news, unless it made him look like a king. So his lifestyle was fake news. Anything that didn't portray me properly was fake news. I think his lifestyle from way before running, when he was growing up, doing everything they did, anytime he was in the news, anything negative was fake anyway. But he was able to get in social media and then get that spot that he had, and he was able to run with it. He was able to make it his own. And
that's a very important observation. And actually, I want to talk numbers for a minute. He did garner 88 million Twitter followers, and everything's about numbers too. just to back up, with all the cable proliferation, those shows, the news shows we watch, and this is considered good, you get 2 to 3 million eyeballs per show on average. Now, these, like for those 24-hour news stations, some of the other cable shows, those are considered good numbers. Years ago, when there was less stations, like a show like 2020, they used to be the gold standard, used to get about 17 million viewers. Those numbers will never be had again on one station because everything's so broken down. But that is also one of the other big boons of social media. They could come in these humongous numbers. And that's exactly what happened with the former president in part. He did come in with he was a celebrity. Let's face it, that's all part of it. And part of having that base. And 88 million eyeballs is a very, very, very large number. So anyway, I do think that's such an important point. And on the fake news, just to get back to that, we know, so dangerous. That in and of itself is misinformation. And I did look up when supposedly he first said it or coined it, and it was directly at CNN, which we know is a tactic, because if you're attacking the source, and that was one of my surprises. I missed things. My head was in the sand when I was taking care of my father. He had Alzheimer's. I feel like I woke up, I had fallen down the rabbit hole, speaking of rabbit hole, and people were saying these things, fake news. And I was like, what does that mean? And I remember I was repeating a tweet that the former president had tweeted, something very inflammatory. And somebody said to me, fake news. And I said, no, I saw it with my own eyeballs.
Right.
But that's their answer. Now there's all these coined phrases, rigged election, fake news. I mean, these are the height of disinformation. So that act in and of itself was very harmful. He also called CNN Clinton News Network. Remember that?
Wow. Yeah.
He also said no longer. Did you remember when he said, we don't even get the New York Times and the Washington Post and the White House anymore? I won't read it. What leader?
Well, come on now. You're saying that as if he read anything. He didn't even read his military report. So he said that, but he didn't read anything.
Right.
He read the comic
strips. We are battling that. That's
pictures.
Crashing, of sources. So anything you try to. So that's why I go back to, like, when you're trying to have a conversation,
right,
about you can't talk about policies or opinions, because again, you can't even get to that because it's the facts. And if I'm told my sources are fake, where do I go from there? It's just like, it's so well thought out that people don't realize what those tactics really are.
But the danger in those
tactics, exactly.
The danger
tactic.
The danger in those tactics is when you turn it from, when you make the face of the news reporter the face of that channel, and then people start attacking them, physically wanting to harm them. That's when the sickness. That's when the sickness gets embedded in their spirit, in their soul, because they go from, it's not that they just hate that station. They hate anybody whose face ever appears on it. And when they see news reporters and they say, what station are you? And if you say, I'm with MSNBC, all of a sudden they go, oh, what station? Oh, good. You're from what? And they're ready to harm somebody. So that's when there's a sickness in that mentality.
Whereas years ago, they used to be respected. Oh, I'm, Ted Koppel from blah, blah, blah. Now they've got death threats at the Gen 6 resurrection.
Right.
Insurrection. Resurrection.
And that would be an interesting study.
So, there's that.
To look at even just, 7 years ago, right? Before he became a known voice, right? What was the image of these news channels, all of them, right? Even for the majority of his followers.
Yes.
It was very different. A lot of conservative people respected CNN and New York Times.
And if you all remember, Obama would make sure that they were respected. He would make sure. I don't know if you all watched at times, but there were times when people would make comments, and he was like, no, we leave that. This is important that they're here. Right. They're supposed to share this information. You know, exactly. I just need to fix it up if it's something that they said that isn't quite right. I'm here to fix it up, but I'm not here to stop them from reporting the news.
Yes,
and then you get that one. Then you get that.
And that's yes, and right. That's why I go back to the managing of that. The fact that nobody saw that as a problem. Again, they're not seeing everything because they're watching their channel, or what, you know, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because again, I flick back and forth, two different planets.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Mariana?
But it's hard, Stephanie, to see it as a problem when this agenda gives you power, right? And to to people who look like you.
Yeah.
Who look like you, right?
Say that again, Mariana.
I mean, even for the average American, right? Like, you know, why should someone look at that and say like it's not accurate when this narrative serves me well and keeps me with power and privilege?
Exactly.
And there's danger in that. That's dangerous.
Yes.
And nobody's talking about that too, because that's where the issue really lies. But we're not going to really talk about that. We're going to call it something else that it has really nothing to do with. To again, misinform, to disinform, you know.
And election legitimacy and these there's all fancy names. That's why I'm also very hooked on the word humanity, because I don't want to hear any baloney about that. You know what I'm saying? Everything that's said, oh, you're woke. There's an answer. Instead of sensitivity and understanding, there's a put down for any communication of, hey, there's a problem here. This is a social injustice, and we need you to listen. There's just this put down, this response of us and you and versus them. And so that is what I am referring to when I say that's a problem, because the people who may be persuaded are cut off from that information. And I have an issue with that as well. You know what I'm saying? There's all levels. So that's why, again, I find it very frustrating that this landscape allows for it. The sad part
is, like when Mariana said that was on point when she said it empowers you. And that is so dangerous, because that empowered person turns around and says, go get them. They don't like to go get them. And that's when that empowerment turns dangerous. And he starts inciting, well, not him, but when that person of power starts inciting people to go out and attack other people who don't think like you, because they don't think like us, so they're against us and they're not patriotic and this and that. And what you do is you convince people who claim patriotism to go out and do unpatriotic acts.
Yes.
And when she said empower, I was like, ooh, Mariana hit it right there. She hit it there.
Stephanie, I'm highlighting a couple other comments if you can read. This is another comment from Danique.
Okay, find the networks and the outlets that hate and misinformation is posted on. I'm sure they will make better efforts to monitor. Definitely, and content effort. And again, let's not forget the public blockade. Danique, you're going to be in charge of the flogging. We're going to hire you.
No, right?
And actually, the money is.
I'm getting nervous.
At this point.
Right.
We're living.
Hit them where in the pocketbook, right? Because that's where it hurts, right?
Yes. Well, that's exactly right. Let's put it this way. If abolishing racism were profitable, I mean, that's how I'm starting to look at it.
Oh, that's
right.
Maybe, it would happen.
Right.
And that's, again, I'm going back, I'm talking about these media examples, because even back in the beginning, that was actually quite wise to say, hey, we got to reserve space, airtime space for social issues with fairness. So whoever came up with that was brilliant. And that notion, however it plays out, still needs to happen. There needs to be some sacred place for social issues without us raising them and getting accused of being socialists or Marxists or
exactly
stuff like that. It goes so crazy.
Right. Why can't we just
when it's
be
just
humane? You know?
Mhm.
right.
Right.
Right. Or, again, they're not listening, and you've got the leaders, they don't want to lose their power, they don't want to lose their money.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other ones, oh my God. So, yeah, it's trying to break that cycle piece by piece. I don't
Right.
have the answers because
Right.
we would be in this situation. We all have the answers, but at least it's trying to find them
Right.
somehow.
Stephanie, there's another comment by Maida I posted up.
We're living in a day where people would rather believe a lie than the truth. Yes, it's easier, which makes me think
Yeah.
of this. I'll see it when I believe it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not, you
Right.
don't
Exactly.
want to. You're right. It's more convenient. It's hard to say, okay, wait, let me step back. And how is this affecting someone else? People don't
Right.
do it.
Mm-hmm. And
Mhm.
you see these interviews where the people in the mainstream media, they go to say one of these rallies, just say the former president's rallies, and they want to interview because we are struggling to understand why it is that so many people are believing a blatant lie. So it's like we've
Right.
got to go talk to them. So they go and like, so do you really believe the president, like the then president, lost the race? It was, the election was stolen. Yes, we do. But even when 61 courts have said there's no evidence, and it's like, well, yeah, but I still believe it. Like,
Mhm.
That one
Yeah.
defies logic.
but like people, like we literally see them say that on camera, like, yeah, but I still believe it. But 61 courts, many of them the former president put in office, so they were Republicans too. Like,
Exactly.
why does that not compute? Like,
And
there's
even
no conspiracy. These are your people who are supposedly in your party saying no, the election was fair.
Right.
well, that's what I
No,
was going to say. You
those
had
are,
go ahead, Mariana.
no, they said those are infiltrated people. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
to me, like the irony, sadly, with like this comment, and I very much agree, is that like having been raised, this is a thing, a part I missed sharing a bit more. Like I remember hearing a lot about like Fox News is Christian and all of this stuff, being in a very conservative environment, but a lot of the criticism towards like more progressive people, even spiritually, is like, oh, they're too grace based, and like they need to be more truth based than grace based, right? So that's a comment about us. But then when you come back and say, but these are a lot of lies that you believe, right? They're actually not that interested in the truth, even though that's
Mhm.
something that they say all the time, right? So that's
Right.
The other problem that they have is to admit the truth. That means that I believed a lie, and the one thing that I will not do is admit that I was on the wrong side.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's a big problem too. It's people's egos are attached
Too
to
much
their
pride.
belief.
Yeah, that's right. About being right and winning.
Mm-hmm. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
their
What?
pride won't let them, be incorrect. We're human, we're broken, we're flawed, we're going to be incorrect sometime. Right.
Right.
What type of example are we being to the children if we can never admit that we're wrong? Yet you're telling your child, you better tell me the truth. Well, what example are
Right.
you telling? Are you setting for your child about truth? When
Right.
you're spreading the biggest lies of them all, that's affecting a country's democracy. I mean, it's a very slippery slope, and it's dangerous,
It
extremely.
is.
We're in a dangerous place in America right now. And
Yes.
I don't know, and I've said this every time probably we've been on the show, the past 3 or 4 episodes. We're in a very dangerous place, and it does not take that long. Look how short of a period of time it took us. It took one presidency for us to get here.
Right.
One 4-year term for us to get here. Now, I'm not saying there weren't things that led up to this before him, but that megaphone, that bully pulpit that
Right.
he had, like you say, Stephanie, with all those 88 million eyes,
Right.
right? And some very swayable, who want to, believe what he's saying. They are no better off than they were when he left office than when he came into office, right? Because he said he was going to do all whatever. They're in the same position they were when he
Worse.
left
Right.
office,
Right.
Some
right?
of them worse.
Maybe course. So why if that was because it was said it's the economic plan, it's the economy, because he's a millionaire, billionaire, he knows whatever. You are in the same place, or maybe even worse than when he left. You're in the same place. So what happened? Nothing. Now, all of that he promised for you, the little man, to be in a better place, you're not. So what are you wrapping your mind around? What are you still holding on to? So it's got to be something more than economic.
I think they were stuck on his continued reality show. That's it. Though so many people, and I'm not saying all of the people that voted for Trump and all of it, but such a large majority followed him as a reality show host, and they figured he knows how to run businesses. He has businesses. He's on TV, and he can do it. And they were enthralled with him from just being, like you said,
but after 4 years, I can see the first time when you don't really know, because all you know him as a TV star, whatever. But after 4 years, and you saw a lot of what he did and did not do, and all the things that he said, I mean, the name called, the juvenile nature, of calling people names. I mean,
their hate was larger than any truth. Their hate was larger than the disbelief that they would have in believing that he lied, because they were sold a lie so much that they internalized it, and their hatred of what they didn't believe, or people that didn't follow him, their hatred seemed to be the catalyst to make them have the inability to decipher the truth from him.
Well, that's why I'm saying it has to do more than with him being a reality star. You know what I mean? Because after a point, you start to say, wait a minute. Yeah, I liked your Apprentice show, but something's off here.
Right. But it's a team. It takes a team to communicate these lies. And that's one of the points I was making with some of this media stuff. Fox, yes, is one news station, but it is the number one conservative, and they're all watching that one, and they do really hype it up. And in addition to not communicating, and this is why maybe, I don't know if you can remember some examples of what you've seen on Fox, but I'm going to throw out a few that I know are not fair. For instance, when Dante got shot in Minneapolis, I mean, that was big news. It was immediately all over the left skewing news media. It was not immediately on it at all. And in fact, what they were showing, they eventually get to it a little bit, but what they were showing was, and the ticker tape was, law and disorder, and all the rioting, and the communication was not that there was unrest because of an injustice. The communication from Hannity that night was, and it's going to be another summer of looting and violence. That is what
fear factor
screaming. Right. So it's not just, it's one man at the top and his tweets. And in fact, people have said to me things like, I'm a law and order guy. And I'm like, what does that make me? Lawless and full of chaos? Why are you saying that to me? Because I'm not voting conservative? What are you talking about? But they really believe left is violent, and that is drilled into a lot of people. It is drilled into their head from that kind of rhetoric. And that's why I feel like maybe I should call Prince Harry to join his team.
Right.
I know, because when I was reading it, I said, man, would I like to be a fly in that thing? I would like to take a part of that.
Part of it, exactly. Who knows? Maybe your door will be open for us, ladies.
In Jesus' name, hallelujah.
And to that point, Stephanie, law and order. What about the insurrection on January 6, 2021? Right. If you're so pro-police, police got killed and stomped on and hurt, and you didn't care about them then. These are the same people who are saying we are law and order a party. No, you're the
equated
party
that.
of right. When it
Right.
benefits you, whatever benefits you, that's the party that
Right.
you're on. You don't care about who's
Mhm.
behind
Mhm.
the shield, if you will.
Yeah.
But again, I was flicking back and forth. They're not showing the full videos for the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the world is watching. It's a little clip. And in fact, the day after the insurrection, for the first time, they were doing something happy, like little dolphin stories in the morning. I was
Well,
like,
if they
what
weren't doing
I
that,
was
they
so
were.
mad.
If they weren't doing
Right.
that, they were complaining about Mr. Potato Head. They were complaining about
Mm-hmm.
all of those stupid
Right,
things
right,
because it's called deflection. They had to get the
right, right,
news off of what would
right.
prove that they had a problem, you know? So
Stephanie, we have a question from Maida.
Right. My question is, if the election was rigged, then the former president didn't win the states he allegedly won. That is
Mhm.
exactly right, Maida. I actually was always saying that. I kept saying, well, let's recount Texas. Let's recount. I
Right,
was
right,
so mad. Nobody's
Yeah, and how
saying
come the
that stuff.
Senate?
And also right, just quickly to your point, Maida, then the Congress, right, is that what you're going to say, Marion? Then some of
Yeah,
those
like how
congressmen
about the
didn't win.
rest of the congressmen? Like, did Mitch
exactly.
McConnell not win? You know.
Right.
But people, they're grabbing sound bites. They're not
Mm-hmm.
sound
taking,
bites. Hmm.
some people, right, they're not taking the time. Do you know what I mean? Like
Right.
some of us we take to pick through, or they're not listening at all. Like they're just listening to their boyfriend. Whatever it is, it
Mm-hmm.
is infuriating. But
But
it's
I
those sound
think
bites. Go ahead.
that part about listening to the boyfriend or someone else is key because, especially coming from a conservative background, asking questions was not encouraged. We were told what to believe, right? And if you start to ask questions, you're seen as a problem. And there was this like reinforcement of you believe what the pastor says, and the pastor is posting Fox News stuff, right?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
There was like a strong emphasis on believing those among us who are experts, right? Those voices without asking
Right.
questions. So I think it's actually not uncommon. There are many times, like even like this past summer, I made the comment to someone like a year or two younger than me that like like yes, within very conservative church background, I don't think a lot of you would approve of him having casinos, and she thought that was making up a lie that Trump owned casinos. Like they had no idea about this, and it's something that
Wow.
right, like that
They have no
that
idea.
that that unknown. Like many people actually don't know much about this man, and
They
all of
don't.
their information comes from like
Mm-hmm.
this case and all their sister and brother who are just like Trump fanatics, right? And they're the ones who like share all this news with them, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of like people being very uninformed, but asking questions is actually discouraged, right? So people do
Right.
get their information through a boyfriend, through a brother, through like someone they're told they should listen to at church.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Yeah. Very, very true.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about someone mentioned earlier about the whole Christian aspect of things, which is very disheartening as a Christian. That
Yeah.
Christians are, in my estimation, by what happened over that 4-year presidency, are given a bad name because first and foremost, God is love, right? There's no love in that behavior,
Hmm.
right? That's self-absorbed, self-righteous, everything me, self. And we're supposed to die to self, die to our flesh as Christians, right? And be, other inclusive. And the fact that, many of our, evangelical Christian brothers and sisters took to him the way they did, as opposed to maybe sharing the truth of the gospel, you know what I'm saying, and helping say him along the way, um, just co-signed
Mm-hmm.
on
Yeah, but
that nonsense. And that's not what we do.
That's not. And the other side of that,
We bring the truth of the word to the situation, and then
right.
allow God to help us along the way. We don't co-sign on nonsense. So
Right.
then how does that represent us as Christians to those who are not Christians? So then, well, why should we follow your God if this is what your God believes? No, but that is not what it is. It's
And
a misrepresentation. It's false.
and
It's wrong.
Sharon, you know what the other problem that I have with that is that when they would talk about evangelicals standing behind Trump, but when you looked at it, it was white evangelicals, black evangelicals. 90 to 98% of black evangelicals did not approve of what he was about. So they don't. They keep on, like so many times they would say evangelicals stand for, no, tell the truth. White evangelicals, because there is an ethnic cleansing happening here, and they're trying to make everything that they want to come across, which is how this country was, the inception of its country happened. White evangelicals came and said everybody else was a savage, so we're taking over. So now when Trump gets in office, white evangelicals saw that as an opportunity to latch on to him and do what he did. And then what it does is, like you said, it makes all evangelicals look like they follow this mindset. And then we have to defend ourselves, which we really don't have to defend ourselves. We could just tell the truth. We just tell the truth. We tell the people how it is, and we try to explain to them, listen, what they're saying, what they're preaching out, what they're saying, that's not what we believe, how we believe it.
But where were the voices saying that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. The white evangelicals took that time to just incorporate around him, get around him, and they seem to bubble him and say, this is what we believe. And like you said, you're right. Not enough black evangelicals got out there and said, we don't stand with this. They just, I don't know.
And not even evangelicals. Where's the rest of Christendom? Christendom is not all evangelicals.
Right.
If that's not what we believe,
Baptists,
that's getting held up as the standard. No, that is not the standard of Christ.
That is not.
Not at all.
But I think
Stephanie,
it's interesting because in other parts of the world, for example, where I grew up, there was only 2% of the population being evangelical, right? But in the United States, white evangelicals are the majority and they have the most power, right? And because they do have money. And honestly, it's embedded with the theology, honestly, from being raised in the background of that, like denomination, Southern Baptist,
right?
That, we know what's the best way of living, right? And we know the best, like we know the best religion, we know the best way of life. Therefore, we have to, and it's not imposed, that's not the language, but, we have to convert everyone to our way of life, right? So I think in some ways there was actually a parallel with, the white evangelical thinking and Trump's mentality of like, I'm just going to go as a bulldozer and take over. They have tried to do that in other ways, and the way they came and evangelized our part of the world, Eastern Europe and in Africa, and how missionaries have, imposed, American culture. They have very much done that. There was things about our culture that we were told, to do as evangelical in Eastern Europe that had nothing to do with our Moldovan and Romanian culture.
Wow.
It was very much Southern Baptists from the States culture, right? Then we had to take that upon us.
Wow.
Which like in some ways very much affected our communities, right? In the sense of like, we were very much like, almost like the Amish, right? We were so much removed from culture and were told anything that the culture had was sinful and we had to live differently. Which, I think in some ways I was like robbed of my own culture growing up, because our music, our dances, our traditional, clothes, all of that was considered sinful being an evangelical Moldovan.
Wow.
That's what I'm saying. All I'm saying is wow.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, that's but it's not a shock, because again, that's how the inception of this country, this continent that we're on, the inception was, we got to come over there and take the land because it's nothing but savages living there. No, these were people that had beliefs, faiths,
Yeah.
and they had different things, and they had their rights stolen from them. And it's been like that since, like I said, since the inception of America.
Stephanie, we have a couple more comments. That's one from Denise.
Okay, so thank you for my internet break. Kicked me off. Denise saying,
Yeah.
there is nothing Christian about ignoring the suffering of a whole race of people for centuries. If the love of God isn't in it, it's not of Christ, period.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, let's face something now, because if you did now, and Rosie 101, just it's me. But if you follow Christianity, especially the white evangelicals and a lot of the people, if you follow their theology and I'm talking about the QAnons and white supremacists of that side of it. You can't say that you love Jesus. You can't truly say that you follow Christianity.
Exactly.
Because if Jesus showed up, you would spit in his face because he's a Jewish man. So let's keep it real.
Exactly.
Keep it real. You can't follow Jesus because he not only is Jewish, but he has black blood in him from his historical, from the histories of the different people coming together. So if you read the Bible correctly, you would not believe what you believe. You wouldn't.
You wouldn't have hate in your heart.
You wouldn't have hate in your heart.
Right. Even when people do you wrong, you wouldn't have hate in your heart.
Right.
That's what Jesus represents. Exactly. Let alone someone who has never done anything to you. They're just a different color than you because man has made colors out of people. You know what I mean? God didn't do that. Man did that. So, it's, Christians, no, I don't even know where they can even get that from. But Stephanie, here's another comment from Maida. Yeah, but even if Jesus was white, the Bible still is the same. Regardless of what color he is, he's still a God of love and not hate.
I agree with Maida with this next question, 100%.
So they were behind him because his stance on abortion and LGBT community. I might have missed a comment. Behind who? I was
behind the former president.
She's talking about the former president.
Right, so yeah.
Behind him. But who's they? I'm sorry, I missed the...
the people who voted for him and his followers.
Yeah, white evangelicals.
Okay. So they've...
right. Yeah.
Anti-stances and...
Yeah, and also, too, because, the number of judges that put on the bench, which is extremely important. See, this is why we have to vote, because it matters who's on the bench.
Yes.
Because the judges who are on the bench, they hold our lives in their hands with how they judge cases. And if you have a racist judge, say no more. Say no more. Why is the criminal justice system 55% around African American when we only make up roughly 13% of the population? Why is that? When you look at across drug dealers and drug sales and things of that nature, you have more black people who are incarcerated for the same type of crime that a white person does for the same type of drug. But the black person is incarcerated more, 4 to 6% more of the time for the same drug crime.
Yeah.
Right. And they sell drugs to say at the same rate. That's racism any way you look at it. But who's sentencing? Who's doing the sentencing? Right?
Exactly. Sharon, it's funny that you say that.
From the beginning, from arrest to sentencing. It's funny. A systemic racist system.
It's funny that you say that, even though it's not funny, because I remember going to court one time and it was stupid. It was about a vehicle on my property that wasn't registered. Now it was pulled all the way in the back of my driveway. So I was under the impression that as long as it's off the street, then it's okay. So when I found out that no, I couldn't even have it in my driveway, I had the vehicle removed. But when I showed up at court and I talked to the prosecutor, he said, "Oh, you had it removed? Okay, well, I'm going to have the judge. We're going to just drop your case then because you had it removed and everything." Now, this older white gentleman I was waiting to go in front of him, and there was a white lady in front of me who was in there for drugs and doing all kind of stuff. She went back and forth with him. She cussed at him, everything. And he was like, well, ma'am, I'm going to explain to you. You're going to have to listen. And she stormed out of there. Nothing, right? I get up there. The attorney, the prosecutor told me, you don't have to say anything. I'm going to just tell him we're going to drop it. You know what the judge did? He said, well, I'm going to make an example out of her. And the prosecutor looked at me and looked at the judge. He said, I don't care if the car is removed. I'm going to make an example out of her, and charged me almost $300 for the car that was in my driveway that was taken away. And yet this young white girl was disrespectful. I said, okay, well, mine is going to be so simple. I'm going to be in and out of here.
And you had the prosecutor on your side.
The prosecutor said, Miss Anderson, don't worry about a thing. Long as you had it removed, I'm gonna just tell the judge we're gonna drop it, and you might have to pay the $35 court cost, but don't worry about it. I'm just gonna make sure it's dropped. He did all the talking, and then when he finished, the judge looked at me and said, the older white guy looked at me and said, well, I'm gonna make an example out of her. I was like, what? He said, I'm going to charge her $300 for having that vehicle in there. And the prosecutor looked at me. He actually looked floored. He didn't know what to say. He said, but Your Honor, she had the car removed. I don't care. I'm making an example out of her.
That's so cool.
I
want to know the name of this judge now.
Oh, honey, that was listen. That was a long time ago, because I've been in my house for over 20 years. So it had to be like around about 18 years ago. So, but I was like, I was just shocked. I was like, wait a minute, you can't even be a good citizen and be treated right. And
right.
So I just said, okay, had to do with the color of my skin, because that lady should have been arrested. She should have been put in jail for disrespecting the judge.
Exactly.
She should have been the example.
Yep. But nope.
She should have been the example. Exactly.
Yeah. And I didn't even open my mouth. I didn't even open my mouth, and I was made an example.
That is just terrible.
Yeah.
Sharon, prayer starts in 2 minutes, honey.
I know. I just looked at the clock.
Yeah. I might be leaving y'all.
Stephanie, are we wrapping up?
Yes, we can wrap up. I knew we were going to talk. We could always talk about it. Liz Cheney and the next level.
Yeah, we'll continue the conversation because this is a necessary conversation.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that'll be the topic for next time.
Yes, we will continue this conversation next time. And of course, if anything else comes up in the news that takes precedence, we will address that as well. And more than likely, the latest news of that young man who was murdered by police 2 years ago is now coming out. I'm assuming that's going to get some circulation within the next 2 week news cycle. So we're probably going to be talking about that, because that's another heinous George Floyd-like murder that was covered up for 2 years. But we're not going to get into that. Look at the social media feed and you'll see it. I'm sorry, what'd you say, Steph?
The cover-ups and the shush-ups.
Yes, exactly. At every level. At every level, right? Every level. But thank God for that reporter who did his due diligence to get those tapes released. Otherwise, we would never know about this. And there's so many that are out there that we don't know about. This is just the few that we're seeing, but I'm not going to get on my soapbox. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching us this evening. We really appreciate you. This is Race Matters, and share the feed if you haven't on your page, so others can watch it, on their downtime, and so they can know about our show and join us next time. We will be on 2 weeks from now, is it, ladies? The first Thursday in June, which is somewhere around the 3rd or something like that. Wow, June is coming up already. This is like time is flying.
Yep, so June 3rd, yeah.
June 3rd is our next show, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So join us on Full Life Communications on Facebook and YouTube on June 3rd at 6 p.m. We love you. God bless you. Have a God evening. Shalom.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
All right, ladies, I'm jumping off of here in a